It was a summery kind of cottage day. Katie discovered that if you put a water hose on a bucket, it all doesn't necessarily stay in the bucket. Orbie discovered that if you're in the wading pool and make a huge tidal wave, a lot of things are going to sink. And they both found out that when you're wet and you get splashed, it's wet. But when you're dry and you get splashed, it's freezing. The day was perfect for playing outside. Katie and Orbie were lathered in sunscreen, and Dad had jabbed a huge umbrella on one side of the wading pool so they could play in the sun and in the shade. Dad sat on a nearby lawn chair, watering the garden and watching the two friends. Orbie discovered that you could actually make shadows on the umbrella and did a silly show for Katie. And then Katie got into the pool holding a duck-shaped ring around her tummy and did a funny splash dance. And Orbie clapped his hands and burbled that Katie was the best splash dancer Orbie had ever seen. And they laughed and raced around the yard, being seaplanes coming in for a splash landing. And when they got to the pool, they leapt in and slid across the slippery bottom. As they both sat drenched in the pool, Orbie's tummy made a loud grumble. Katie giggled. Orbie tooted that all the running and splashing and dancing was making his tummy kind of hungry. Once he said it, Katie realized her tummy was kind of hungry, too. Dad was still watering the garden, and Katie and Orbie hurried over to him. They told him that their tummies were feeling very hungry. And Dad wasn't surprised. It was lunchtime. Almost as soon as he said it, Mom came out the screen door with a big tray. There were bright-colored glasses filled with juice and a whole pile of sandwiches. Mom spread a towel under the umbrella and placed Katie and Orbie's sandwiches on it. She sat their juice glass on the side of the pool. The two friends loved having a private picnic under the big umbrella and began to munch away. Katie was telling Orbie all about how much fun it would be to bring out the great big bubble dipper and make giant bubbles. And they could each take turns popping the bubbles as they came out. Orbie agreed it would be great fun. And as he did, Katie picked up her cheese sandwich. She was about to put it in her mouth for a big bite when Orbie tooted for her to stop. Katie was looking at Orbie and not at the sandwich, which was why she didn't see a spider looking right into her open mouth. He was sitting on the sandwich. Well, Katie screamed and threw her sandwich up in the air. Mom and Dad came running. And when Orbie told them about the spider, Mom smiled. Dad asked if the spider ate much of the sandwich. Katie did not even smile. She was up on her feet and anxious to run inside and hide. She didn't want that ugly spider to come near her again. Orbie found the spider on the ground and was about to stamp on it when Dad asked him not to. Dad picked up the spider, and it hurried up his hand to get away from the big pink monster. Dad held the spider away from Katie, but he held it still so she could see it. He agreed that it was ugly, but he explained that the spider needed all those legs to help spin his web. Katie told Dad she didn't like spiders. Dad explained that there were all kinds of spiders. He said that while they could squish it, he would much rather that they protected it because it was protecting them. Both Katie and Orbie looked at each other. They wanted to know what the spider was protecting them from. And Dad asked if either Katie or Orbie knew what spiders liked for lunch. Katie said, cheese sandwiches. But Dad shook his head. He told them spiders don't actually eat people food. They eat bugs. Katie grimaced, but Dad continued, one thing they do for us is keep the bug population under control. Birds and spiders are big helpers. Katie looked at the spider differently. She told Dad that he was still ugly, but she didn't want him to kill it, especially if the spider was working so hard. Dad told her that he would be spider transport the next time they found one. Spider transport would find a better place for them. And with that, Dad made a truck noise and pretended to drive the spider to a better place. He circled back and asked Katie and Orbie to get on the truck because he needed a place that was full of bugs for the spider to enjoy. So Katie and Orbie followed Dad, making a long truck, and they shouted for Dad to head for the flower garden. There was zigzagging and wrong turns, but soon they were there. Katie showed Dad that there were a lot of bugs in the garden. Dad told him this must be the perfect place. And he held out his hand. The spider liked what he saw because he began to spin a web from Dad's hand and spin his way down to the ground. As soon as he landed, he was off. Dad shook both Katie and Orbie's hand and thanked them for being part of the spider rescue team and motored over to his sandwich plate. He picked up a piece of his sandwich and then motored right back to the picnic under the umbrella. He dropped the pieces of his sandwich on Katie's plate. He picked up the pieces she'd thrown and motored back to his lawn chair. Katie and Orbie giggled as they munched on their picnic lunch. One thing about Dad was he really knew how to be silly. And from that day on, whenever Katie and Orbie saw spiders, they called Dad, who would put it in a jar and carry it out. They would all try to find a better place for the spider to be happy in. They appreciated the spider's help in keeping the number of bugs down. And do you know that you can help spiders that get into the wrong place too? By asking an adult to take them outside to a place where they'll be much happier. If you do, I know the spider will really appreciate it. And so will you, when there aren't as many bugs around.
Did you know? There are some animals who like to live where it is very, very cold. Polar bears, penguins, and muskox all live in the ice and snow. But I don't think you'll ever see a camel at the North Pole.